Sorry, that last video ended a little bit abruptly. This is part 2 of lecture 4, and so this video is going to be about the job application letters, sort of picking up from where we left off talking about resumes. So just as resumes are highly individualized to specific jobs and positions, so are job application letters. In fact, even more so than the resume. The letter needs to focus strongly on what you can do for the employer. One of the biggest missteps I see in job application letters are writers who talk a lot about how great getting this job would be for them and how they really need this experience so they can climb up the occupational ladder. The employer doesn't really care that the job would benefit you. The employer wants to hear how you will benefit him or her. So show how your experiences fit the job's needs. Look at the job listing, and it's asking for certain skills and experiences and personal traits, and your letter is where you're going to be able to specifically discuss some of those items and how you have had those experiences, how you have those skills, how you have those traits. And it won't be enough that you just say, yeah, I have good people skills. You're going to need to maybe explain a situation that shows your good people skills in action. So it's making the connection between your skills, experiences, etc., and what you know they're looking for. You're also conveying something about your personality, which hopefully is going to be likable. Again, another one of the missteps I sometimes see in job application letters is a sort of an arrogant tone. I think most of the time those writers are trying to sound confident, but if there's sort of a line you can cross where you go past confident into sounding like you're arrogant, and so you've got to find the right place there. And ultimately the goal of this letter is to point them to the resume and also to secure an interview. So part of how you will secure an interview is through the tone that you are able to convey, what you're able to show about yourself, and how you will show that you're paying attention to the employer's needs and how you're talking about how you can do the things that they are looking for. Now, this is another little video that, again, you will have to go into Blackboard Learn. I've got it posted in there, and it's a brief video about cover letters. And most of the tips in there I would agree with. So please do give that a quick look-see. Now, in our class, for this upcoming assignment, you're going to be writing what is referred to as a solicited job application letter. So what we mean by solicited is that whoever someone has put out an ad, whether that's a job listing on the internet, whether that is something posted on a job board, whether it's a sign in a window even. Someone has said essentially, help wanted, your letter is in response to that. That is what makes it solicited. So that is discussed in the textbook on page 379. The introduction to a solicited job application letter contains 3 pieces of information, and you need to have them in that first paragraph that facilitates screening. So you're going to name the position you're seeking for. Don't just say, I see you have a position. A large business is going to have many vacancies, so name the specific position you're applying for. Indicate where you saw it listed or advertised, and then give your main qualification for the position. So a lot of times it is going to be your educational background, but in some instances it might be years of personal experience. I will warn you though, for example, the sample solicited application letter in the textbook, which is on page 379, one of the things that letter does is refer to a person by name. Now, if you actually have a genuine personal connection that would be meaningful to the employer, then you might mention that person. But don't just name drop for the heck of it. Don't say something like, I want a job for you because my uncle worked in one of your stores in Tennessee. They're not going to know who your uncle is. It's not going to mean a darn thing. So don't mention another person unless that person's name will be recognized and will reflect positively upon you. The body of the job application letter is usually going to be a couple of paragraphs, and it's going to, as I said before, tie your specific experiences and skills into the job requirements as listed on the jobs listing. So it needs to use concrete detail. Don't just talk in generalities. Everyone says that he or she's a people person. Everyone says they have attention to detail. You need to show how you have these things. It's not uncommon for the body of an application letter to use the first paragraph of the body, which would be the second paragraph of the letter, to focus on hard skills, and then the next paragraph to focus on soft skills or people skills. So that's not the only way to do it. The sample in the textbook actually has 3 body paragraphs. You don't have to have 3, you can have 2. I think what's more important is that you have specific experiences and that you are being concrete about what you've done in the past. And then the conclusion is formulaic, kind of like the introduction was. Usually might point them to the resume if you haven't done so already. It's going to restate your interest, and it's going to ask for interviews. Say something like, I look forward to talking to you. I'd love to talk to you about this. And you're going to offer your contact information. Yes, your contact information is other places as well, but why not make it easy for them to contact you? So put it right there in that last part of the letter. Now, our textbook also discusses unsolicited job application letters. That is not what you are doing for your assignment in this class. I only mention that this exists basically because you might be in a situation where you are applying for an unadvertised vacancy. It's basically you're applying on spec. You don't know if they're hiring or not. That's not going to be the case for you with this assignment because, as you will discover in this assignment, you have to first find an actual ad to write an application letter for, which means that it's solicited by definition. So be aware of this kind of application letter. Do not do it for Project 5. Other things that might be in support of your application could include a dossier or portfolio. Oftentimes colleges will keep transcripts and letters of recommendation on file to send out for people. And so really it's all about knowing what is expected in your field, what is standard application material for people at sort of your occupational level and whatever career you're going into. Obviously, an employment interview is another form of support for your application. A few other basic tips here. If you are posting your resume at a website online, make sure you redact your home address and personal phone number so that you keep yourself safe. Also, be aware that oftentimes prospective employers will look you up online, will Google you to see what your digital footprint is. So it's important to periodically search your own name and just to see what pops up. You may feel like you've done a really good job of locking down your Facebook and you haven't posted any crazy pictures, but maybe someone else has posted something and tagged you on it and you didn't see it at the time. So you want to just see if there's anything out there with your name attached to it that you're not happy with. Another thing to be aware of is sometimes there are people who have the same name as you, who are not you, who have stuff going on. So I had another student one semester who found out that someone with his exact name was a convicted child molester. So that was really important. When people would Google him, employers would Google him, he had to anticipate that they would see this and be prepared to say, no, I'm not the one who's a child molester, I'm this other one. Also, I've heard that some employers or prospective employers are asking people to log into social media so they can see from the individual side what is visible. Now, they obviously have no right to force you to do that, but they also are not obligated to hire you. So one thing you might think about just is, what is your tolerance for this? Are you willing to log in to Facebook or Instagram and let prospective employers see things from your side? Or would you rather say, I'm sorry, if that's the price of having this job, I don't want this job? So it's just something to be aware of in this day and age. Now, the interview is also a form of technical communication. Remember that you've submitted written materials, which obviously you've proofread, you've polished, they're supposed to be great, but your employer doesn't know if you really wrote those things yourself, or if you downloaded them from the internet, or you had your girlfriend write them for you, or whatever. So the employer wants to make sure that you match the materials that you've presented. And it's also a way for you to see if they are someone you'd be willing to work for. Sometimes the employer sounds a lot better on the job listing than they do when you actually speak to them in person, and you may discover it's a bad move for you as well. There are a lot of interview-related tips out there, so I'm not going to read through all of these, but there are a couple that I wanted to comment on. One is not to be afraid to allow for silence when you're asked a question. A lot of questions you might be asked would be very factual. It'd be easy to answer very quickly. But sometimes the questions are not factual. Sometimes they're more intended to be thought-provoking, and you might have to stop and think. And it's okay to say, gee, I've never thought about that. And maybe pause, repeat the question. So it would be better to give a thoughtful answer that you have to sort of wait to give than to just sort of jump in with the first thing that pops into your head. And especially that's the case with this trend that some employers have of asking questions that seem a little off the wall, but that are supposedly trying to give them psychological insight into you or something. So you might get a question like, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And if you just sort of say the first thing that pops into your head, oh, I'd love to be invisible. Well, now you sound like some kind of creeper, right? So it's okay, even if it's a sort of a silly sounding question, to say, gee, I never really thought about it. Try not to roll your eyes or laugh, but then, think about what you might say and how you might explain that answer as well. And then on the other side of things, it's also important to be prepared to ask them questions, because at some point in every interview you will be asked, do you have any questions for us? And you don't want your response to be, yeah, what are you going to pay me? So you might have some sort of logistical questions, but really do some homework. Visit the company's website. What are they into? Are they in the news for anything lately? And then if you have genuine questions about the job and its tasks, you can ask those. But it's really good when you show that you've thought about them and what they do and how you might fit into their corporate culture, and you have questions that relate to that. Now, after the interview, it's a good idea to send a quick email that just thanks the interviewer. So all you're going to do is say something like, it was really great to get to speak with you the other day about the blah, blah, blah position. I hope to hear back from you soon. That's it. You don't ask them more questions. You don't put a hard push on there. You just show that you have the people skills to follow up. And if later you are offered the job and you don't want it, even if you had decided that they would not be very nice people to work for, still be courteous, because you never know. You never know what the future might bring. So for Project 4 and 5, I'm not actually hiring, but you are going to send me some job application materials. The first step is to make sure you have read chapters 3 and 16, which are this week's reading assignment. The next step is to find somewhere, probably on the internet, but it really could be anywhere, a job listing for a job you're qualified for now. So don't find a job that you might be qualified for in 2 years after you finish your college degree. Find something that you could reasonably apply for at this point in time. We're not interested in fantasy, we're interested in reality. And you will need to be prepared to turn in that job listing, so you'll want to copy paste it, screen cap it, whatever is necessary. Then you will be writing a resume that should follow a standard format. So I recommend either the chronological or functional style illustrated in the textbook, picking whichever one seems to best fit your skills and experiences and the vacancy that you're applying for. Then you will write a job application letter that will convey the information that I've talked about on the previous slides, and that will make the connection between the resume and the job listing. All three of these elements are going to need to be in a single word processed document file. So I don't really care what order you put them in. A lot of times resumes take a lot of fancy formatting, and maybe you need to have that first and then put the other things in afterwards. It doesn't matter to me what order they are. Do make sure you make a page break between each of these elements. So if you have your resume first, use a section break before you get to the next page to put in your letter, and use another page break or section break before you're putting in the job listing. So they're each on their own page, and your resume should ideally fit onto one page, unless you have been employed, I would say probably for 10 years or more. Then you can have a second page for your resume. The letter, also only one page, regardless of the number of years you have been previously employed. So what am I looking for when I'm grading this? Well, for the resume, I'm looking for a style that is appropriate and professional. I'm looking for a choice that is going to fit your skills. So whether you pick reverse chronological or functional is going to be up to you as to what fits what you're bringing to the position you're seeking. But you do need to use these standard resume parts and organize them effectively. I'm looking for the use of those action verbs we talked about in the first video to describe your skills and experiences. So don't forget to take a look at the resumes in the textbook on page 374 and 375 and how they use verbs. You also need to make sure your materials are very carefully proofread and worded, so they are highly polished, and you will need to have your job listing. The cover letter is going to have that opening paragraph that has the 3 pieces of information: the position you're seeking, where you saw it, and your main qualifications for the job. It's going to build interest in 2 or 3 body paragraphs using concrete details about yourself that connect to the things the employer is seeking. It's going to focus on the employer's needs. The conclusion is going to point the reader to contact you for an interview, and it's going to provide your contact information. And the letter is also going to be very carefully written and edited. Now, I know a lot of people find information online when they create their personal job application materials. For this assignment, it is very important that you do not do that. Even if your real-life resume has borrowed things from websites and handouts you've received in the past, for this assignment, write new stuff. Nothing that will show up on the internet. It really shows more than you think. Employers see these materials all the time, and they will recognize if they have seen the same job objective, if they have seen the same paragraph in the letter from employee after employee. It also looks funny when you're writing in your own voice and all of a sudden you've got something you've pasted in from a website. It doesn't sound good. So it is important just to be able to talk about your own skills and experiences persuasively. Get a friend to help you proofread if you have to, but talk about yourself. And if you do plagiarize or borrow material in your resume or cover letter, you will receive a 0 on the assignment. So what's due this week? Well, a resume and a cover letter submitted as a single document file with the job listing that you're responding to. And then for next week, we have a couple of chapters to read. Chapter 13, which is on document design. Chapter 19, which is on instructions, and then some pages from Chapter 15 on memo format. So you don't have to read all of Chapter 15, just the pages listed here, 324 through 337 on memo format. If there are any questions about the resume and cover letter or any of the things on any of these two videos, please be sure to post to the questions forum early in the week, and I'll be glad to answer. Happy hunting!